Hello and welcome to NASA SBIR and STTR programs Dissecting the Solicitation webinar. My name is Kate Kavadanik, Operations Lead for the program, and I'll be your host and moderator for the day. Before we begin, I just want to let you know that this session is being recorded and it will be available later. Now, if you've ever looked at a government solicitation document, maybe even ours, and felt overwhelmed and unsure of where to start, you are in the right place. We've carefully crafted the next 2 hours to help you better understand and find your way around the 2022 NASA SBIR and STTR Phase 1 solicitations. We are here to take some of the mystery out of this process so you can focus on putting together the most comprehensive and competitive proposal possible. I'll hold off on sharing the agenda for the day and how our time together is going to be organized, since our Phase 1 lead, Scott Dockham, will be doing that in the first few slides of his presentation for you. But if you do need to reference it, we have put the agenda up on our website. Just go back to the page you were on to access the webinar. And of course, just a few housekeeping notes. Please be sure that you are submitting all questions for the Q&A session into the Q&A box and not the chat box. The chat box is meant only for administrative announcements from our team or if you need technical help. Questions asked in the chat will not be answered live, and you will be asked to redirect them to the Q&A box. From the Q&A box, we'll be taking those questions and organizing them by topic on the back end. So don't worry if you see your question marked answered and we haven't yet covered it. We will get to it. And in the event we aren't able to get to all the questions today, we'll put together answers to key questions and share those out with you after the event. We will also make every effort to answer questions as fairly and openly as we can. However, with the solicitations already open, we are limited in some of the types of responses and advice that we can provide. So please be understanding if your question cannot be answered in quite as much individual or personalized detail as you wished. Lastly, we will make a recording of this Q&A available in the coming weeks, so you're able to go back and rewatch any parts or share it with your friends and colleagues in the industry. You may notice that we are using an auto closed captioning function. While it works pretty well, some things like our acronyms, because we do love our acronyms, won't come through perfectly, and we'll make sure to get those updated in the recording as well. So now, without further ado, let me turn things over to Scott.
All right, thank you, Kate. Really appreciate it. Welcome everyone to this webinar today. I'll be presenting out on the slides and walking you through how to dissect the 2022 SBIR and STTR Phase 1 solicitations. As Kate mentioned, my name is Scott Dockham, and I basically manage the Phase 1, Phase 2 operations for the program, which includes developing the solicitations, getting it out on the street, and then we also manage the review and selection process as well, which we oversee how proposals are reviewed and selected, and then ultimately into a contract for an award. So super happy to see you all here. Appreciate you taking time out of your day to come and listen to our presentation. So with that, let's get started. First thing we're going to do is bring up the agenda. So as you can see here, today's presentation and QA will be divided into 4 segments. We do our best to answer your questions, as Kate had mentioned, but we want to ensure that you submit those questions via that Q&A box. Again, just to reiterate, don't put that in the chat box, put it in the Q&A box so our staff can go through your questions and queue them up for our panel of folks to present out on that. We do have some other folks here on our webinar. We have Dina Salazar, who also works with me, and she'll be participating as well in providing any responses to questions later on. So again, we'll be pulling from those questions throughout the 4 segments, and if we run out of time, we'll follow up the webinar with answers to key questions that we missed. First, I want to acknowledge something. We are all pioneers. Whether you're an entrepreneur or a researcher, the reason you're here is because you want to push the boundaries of technology and see where it can take us. That's inspiring, and we're excited to join forces on that. This program can be an excellent jumping off point for innovation. NASA is ambitious and we want to go back to the moon and then to Mars, but we're not just all about space. We have 5 main mission directorates. We have our Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate. We have Exploration Systems Development. We have Science, Space Operations, and Space Technology. Many of our small businesses and research institutions are also solving challenges that directly impact us here on Earth, like technology to help us better understand Earth's climate, advance uncrewed aerial vehicles for improved communications during natural disasters, and even retinal implants that can improve treatment for retinal degeneration. Sometimes technologies that start out for us in space and come back, they end up coming back to benefit us here. So as an example, aerogels that were originally developed to keep rocket fuels cool is now being used in some of the sports bottles that you can buy that Camelback sells. There are possibilities of how technologies come through this program are endless. To give you some insight on average, approximately 80% of our firms we fund are from companies that have less than 50 employees. We've provided funding in every state, including Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia. When we hear back from our community about the growth they experience from our initial seed funding, whether that's in the size of the company, the revenue, or how far the technology has progressed, reminds us exactly of why this program exists. There's so much untapped potential, and we know there is strength in collaboration. What's on the screen now are eligibility requirements. Of course, you're going to want to make sure you refer to the solicitations for full details. I want to take a moment to dig a little deeper into the existence and purpose of our SBIR and STTR programs. Both are congressionally mandated programs with several important purposes. They stimulate the technological innovation in private sector. They strengthen the role of small businesses in federal research and development, increase the commercial application of research results. They foster technology transfer between small businesses and research institutions. That's specifically for the STTR program. And they foster and encourage participation of socially and economically disadvantaged persons and women-owned small businesses. Regarding the last one, we recognize that diverse and representative teams lead to the greatest innovations. That's why one of NASA's core values is inclusion. In 2021, 27% of the companies selected for SBIR, STTR awards were from underrepresented groups. This included minority and women-owned small businesses. Nearly 20% of the research institutions partnering with small businesses for STTR are classified as minority serving institutions, or MSIs. With your help, we want to raise these numbers. So this slide again just gives some basic information on how you can participate and what the requirements are. Make sure you read the solicitation for that information. We truly believe that stronger innovation comes from wider participation. That's why our STTR program is just as important to us as SBIR. It exists to unlock the power of innovative thinking in our nation's research institutions. So if you take a look at this slide, you'll see why we have differences between those two programs. And we want to make sure that companies understand some of those differences. So as an example, the topics that you'll see for SBIR typically are supported by our mission directorates here at NASA, whereas STTR topics are derived from the 10 different centers that we have within NASA. The period of performance for phase 1 is different depending on the program. So STTR has a longer period of performance for a phase 1. It's 13 months versus SBIR, which is only 6 months. SBIR also has differences and STTR as far as the principal investigator and how they can be active within the program. So for example, SBIR, the principal investigator must be more than 50% employed by, and at least 67% of the research and analytical work must be performed by the small business. Whereas in STTR, the principal investigator can be employed by either the small business or the research institutions. That's a key difference. At least 40% of the research or analytical effort must be performed by the small business, and at least 30% of the effort must be performed by the single research institution that you've identified under an STTR. So we felt that it's important that you understand the differences between these two programs. So what exactly do I get? So let's talk about exactly what you get and dive into the specifics. So as you can see on the slide, 1.15 million phase 1 and phase 2, nearly 3 million or more for post phase 2 opportunities. These are the dollars that we have available to give out under these programs. We have 3 phases within the program. So right now we're mostly focusing on phase 1, but it's good to go through how the whole program operates. So phase 1 is really the idea generation. This is your feasibility study, your proof of concept. You're trying to figure out, does the technology that I'm developing that NASA's looking to, that's asking for, can we make it happen? So you get $150,000 to do that. And it's typically, like I mentioned, you get 6 months for SBIR, you get 13 months for STTR. What happens is after that, you submit a phase 2 proposal based on the work that you completed from phase 1. And if the work was successful and you've got a compelling proposal for phase 2, then you could get an award for phase 2. And the idea there is you start moving the technology out of proof of concept and more into a prototype stage and getting it ready for either a commercial market that NASA has some relevance to, or it would be a market that NASA may be the buyer. You want to try to figure that out as you're moving forward on your phase 1, figure out who your potential buyers are for phase 2. The award amount for that can be up to $1 million. That's new for this year under this solicitation. And that is based on we're hoping for a congressional increase. So as you'll see in the note down on the bottom right, that is planned for $1 million from $750K, which is what phase 2s used to be. However, it's dependent on that final appropriation, which we have not received yet. So once we know that is in place, we can make that final determination. The next step is to move into phase 3. And phase 3, there's no money provided by the SBIR program, but this is where you've de-risked the technology, the prototype is ready, and you now start getting investment from potential buyers. That could be the federal government, which includes NASA, could be external private industry investment. Those are the things that you're going to be looking for to help move the technology forward and continue it down its commercialization path. In addition, between phase 2 and phase 3, we have post-phase 2 opportunities. So these are other parts of our program where you can get additional funding to help move the technology forward. So we have our post-phase 2 ENX. They all have some different requirements. So you'll see there's some requiring matching funding for the post-phase 2 ENX program. We have phase 2 sequentials. And then we have what's called CCRPP. I never get that acronym right, so I'm not going to say it, but CCRPP is also another way that you can get some additional funding to move the technology forward. The last thing I also want to mention, and we'll cover these a little later in the presentation, so keep these in mind, but we also have some great opportunities that you should take advantage of when you're submitting your proposal. We have I-Corps, which is there under the phase 1. And then we also have what's called technical and business assistance, or TABA. And that's additional opportunities that you can receive both for phase 1 and phase 2. And we're also starting up a new initiative where you can get I-Corps, take advantage of that I-Corps opportunity under the post-phase 2 opportunities, particularly for phase 2 ENX and CCRPP. And again, I'll talk about I-Corps and TABA in a lot more detail later on. Every year we issue a solicitation that includes details on the technologies we are looking for. You want to start there and make sure you spend time thoroughly reviewing the solicitation to see where your capabilities and technology ideas fit. The solicitation period is generally open for approximately 60 days, and that's where we are now, in the second circle from the left. Your proposal must be submitted in our electronic handbook, and I'll provide a little bit of information on how you can gain access to that handbook later on. Once the solicitation period closes, we move into a thorough technical review and selection process. This occurs for approximately 3 months as we evaluate the thousands of proposals that are submitted. We then announce the selections on our website, and you receive a notification on whether your proposal was selected. A few things to keep in mind. There are many factors we consider when reviewing proposals. Our successful firms recognize that you don't always win on the first shot. Keep trying. Read the feedback from the program and learn from the process. On average, approximately 60% of awardees each year are repeat proposers, meaning they've submitted another proposal within the last 4 years. We then turn it over to our contracts team to negotiate the awards and get the proper paperwork in place to begin doing business together. Okay, some ground rules. So this, Kate mentioned it a little bit, I'm going to mention it again, but this webinar is intended to help you navigate, read, understand, and respond to the solicitation. It is not official procurement guidance or instructions. It is your responsibility to read and understand the solicitations in their entirety and to develop and submit your proposal in accordance with the requirements and instructions contained therein. Don't use what we're presenting today as your Bible, as I say. Make sure you go and read those documents, and I'm going to show you exactly how to get to them, how to go through them. We're going to do that here a little bit later. Make sure you understand them as you submit your proposal. Our goal here is to provide this information as a tool to help you get through that process, and that's it. Some additional ground rules, things that we will be covering today. So we're going to cover the differences between the two programs, SBIR and STTR. We've already done that a little bit. We'll go through that a little bit more on the website when we do that a little later. How to navigate the solicitation online, or the two solicitations online. And this includes the research areas in Chapter 9. So we'll kind of show you how you can go through and figure out what particular research might align to what you're working on, how to navigate that and understand where you might want to be focusing in on. Important considerations when submitting a proposal. We'll be talking through that as well, because there are a lot of issues that our firms seem to have, and they could be take into consideration some of the things that we're going to provide to you here in this presentation later on. What will not be covered today: specifics related to technologies, research areas, or proposed innovations. We can't do that. There's just no way. We have way too much content in our solicitation to do that. So we're really kind of high level here today. Specifics related to submissions through the EHB. The solicitation is very clear on how you submit your proposal through the EHB. Again, I'll show you how to access that system, but we're not going to go through the step-by-step process of how you do that. And then the other thing you also note is NASA has us on, there's specific rules and policies when solicitations go out all across NASA as an agency. So right now, NASA procurement rules place the agency in a blackout period while the solicitations are open, which prohibits any NASA employee from discussing proposal specifics with any potential offerer. And that's the main reason why we are not going to be spending a lot of time on specific technologies, research areas, or proposed innovations that you all might be thinking about. We just simply can't do that under our rules. All right, some notable changes. So those of you who may have been accessing our solicitations over the years and have seen things, seen the program, you'll probably have noticed that we've done some changes this year, and we've done them for some pretty good reasons. So we're going to go through that now. As you may have been aware, and as I mentioned a few slides ago, award values are increasing, starting with 2022 phase ones. And then the other major change you may have noticed are the programs are no longer combined in one solicitation. SBIR has its own solicitation, STTR has its own solicitation. Why do we do this? Main reason was we wanted to showcase the differences between the two programs. We also wanted to reduce confusion firms were experiencing when determining which program to apply under. A lot of the rules that come with these programs, just people were having a hard time understanding the differences between the two when it was all combined. We also want to reduce the confusion firms experience when determining applicable proposal requirements. So that was a for getting that done. The other thing we did is the solicitation only covers phase 1. Phase 2 solicitations will be provided directly to phase 1 awardees later. In the past, we had combined both phase 1 and phase 2, and we are no longer doing that. And why are we doing that? Allows NASA to provide updated information to firms at the time of phase 2 submission. That was a big problem, and we wanted to ensure that our information was up to date when you get ready to submit that phase 2 proposal. We also found that we were having a lot of firms with confusion as far as determining which applicable proposal requirements they were supposed to use for their phase 2 proposal. Caused a lot of stress on the firm's end side of things, and we're trying to remove that. So that's why we're only focusing on phase 1 at this point in time, and the phase 2 solicitation will come out to phase 1 awardees after they win their awards. All right, solicitations, plan ahead. So submitting a phase 1 proposal requires you as an offer to complete several steps, and there's registrations that come with those steps. So one of the things I'm going to continue to stress is read the solicitation, particularly in chapter 2 of the document. That's where you'll find the requirements to complete these registrations. These registrations take time to complete. If you have not already started that process, you should do so immediately. Do not assume that past registrations are up to date. Please confirm and or update those registrations immediately. We've run into issues where firms thought their registration was up to date and it wasn't, and it caused delays in them getting proposals completed on the timelines that they were establishing and had planned for. So make sure you get those things taken care of. One of the registrations that you're going to be required to do is with sam.gov. And sam.gov has been changing some of their things, the way they operate here lately as the registration process goes. And so now you're going to have to get what's called a unique entity identifier, or a UEI. And a lot of these UEIs have been assigned already to your firm if you've registered in the past. However, it's not guaranteed. So one of the things you need to do is make sure you go to sam.gov and check your registration, or start your registration if you haven't got this already, and make sure that it is up to date and correct, because the UEI number is going to be required in order to submit 2022 phase 1 proposal to our program. The submission EHB, which is our electronic handbooks system, also requires registration, and you'll need to also update those registrations prior to being able to submit a proposal. So again, chapter 2 provides all this information on what you need to do. Just follow those steps and you'll be good. Deadline. This causes a lot of problems for us, and I don't know why. So I'm going to kind of walk through this a little bit in some detail. A complete proposal package for phase 1 shall be received by the handbook no later than 5 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, March 9th, 2022. The solicitation is very clear on that. We've got it all over the place. Not only is it on the cover page, it's also located in chapter 6, and there's other places within the document that it's located. Make sure you understand that deadline is firm and hard. We do not accept late applications. All files consisting of a complete proposal package must be uploaded before that deadline. An offer that waits to submit a proposal package near the deadline is at risk of not completing the required uploads and endorsements of their completed proposal package by the required deadline. So there are things you have to do in order to get that proposal submitted. You have to give us an electronic signature that basically says, I endorse my proposal. Everything is factual and clear and correct. You also need to ensure that you provide enough time for the internet to operate successfully and submit your stuff through the interwebs so that our servers receive the application on time. That seems to be a problem. People are waiting till right at the deadline, hitting that last button, and then your time runs out and the proposal gets rejected because you didn't allow enough time for things to cycle through the electronics, our global electronic system that we have today. It's not always the fastest thing. Your bandwidth, where you're at, your IP addresses and all that, you know, there's all those types of things that could come into play here. Make sure you submit ahead of the deadline so you can make sure those things don't hang you up. If we don't receive a completed proposal package by 5 p.m. Eastern on the deadline, the proposal package will be determined to be incomplete and it will not be evaluated. So please make sure that you plan ahead and submit early. This is the reason why. We've done some statistics on this, and what we're finding out is that about 78% of our firms submit their phase 1 proposals on the day they are due. We don't understand why people are doing this. Submit a couple days in advance. That's what we strongly encourage you to do. And it avoids those last minute issues, particularly when it comes to systems and electronic systems not cooperating as they should. NASA will not accept any late proposals. So we're not going to do that. So make sure you plan ahead and move forward on that. So before I move into TABA and I-Corps, let's pause for a few minutes and see if anyone has questions on the general program as provided so far. So Kate and Dina, if you're there, let's see if we got any questions.
Thank you, Scott. As noted, we're going to pause here, collect some additional questions, provide answers on the topics that were just walked through. Please feel free to continue to enter questions in the Q&A box now. In addition to the questions you submitted today, or you submit today, we'll also be answering many of the questions you submitted prior to the event. So a thank you to people who were proactive and sent some in ahead of time. And in addition to Dina, who's been introduced, she worked closely with Scott on our phase 1 and phase 2 efforts. We may also leverage Bethany McClave. She is our lead for our program's outreach and engagement work, which includes planning this webinar with her stellar team. And if we get really busy, she may jump in to either help ask questions or even provide some answers. We do have questions queued up. I just want to remind you that as we go through these, we may not get to yours in this section. If it's on a topic that was not covered yet, or if we just run out of time in this section, we will hold on to it until we either reach the end of the appropriate section or for the final open Q&A time. So with that, we will get started. You ready, Scott and Dina?
Yes.
All right. So I guess we can start right from the beginning. Some eligibility questions that came in. Can an HBCU be the prime for an SBIR proposal?
So the answer is no. An HBCU is considered a research institution. So on an STTR proposal, that's where you could partner with a small business, and but the small business always serves as the prime for the program. For SBIR, an HBCU can partner and be a contractor, a subcontractor, I should say, to the small business, but the small business always is the prime on both SBIR and STTR projects.
All right. And another one, can a consortium submit a proposal?
So typically a consortium is not allowed on either an SBIR or STTR proposal, because remember, this is for small businesses. So you need one small business to act as the prime. Now, what could happen is that you may want to, as I kind of mentioned in the earlier question, you could subcontract to some of the other firms, other groups within your consortium to help make that technology become something that's feasible and works. However, they would be serving in a subcontractor role. The solicitation describes the rules for subcontracting and how those rules are. So in other words, the prime is going to do most of the work, and you would subcontract out some of the work to other parts within the consortium.
Okay, thank you. Related to that, some personnel type questions. Do all team members have to be US citizens or green card holders?
That's a good one. We get that question pretty regularly. And in general, we would like to see everybody have US citizenship for these projects. If there's any questions on that, if your project is selected for an award, then we can work through our contracting office to address those types of questions. So the rules on those tend to fluctuate depending on what's going on within the federal government. So sometimes there are some changes, and we just need to make sure that we're aware of those. Kate, Dina, do you want to add anything to that?
Nope, it's pretty succinct. It's also the firm has to have a US base and US citizenship. So that's like the main requirement, but all details regarding any employees can be worked out with the contracting officer, and they'll be up to date with the rules.
And I would just add that, yes, and that applies beyond employees. It applies to your subcontractors and everybody else when you're thinking about that.
Yep.
All right. Does the PI have to be full-time with the company?
So the rules are clear on that. We had a slide earlier on in the presentation that kind of went over that. So make sure you take a look at that solicitation. Typically, we would like to see the PI be full-time with the firm and conducting the work. For SBIR, STTR, little bit different. As I mentioned in my earlier slide, the PI can actually be employed by the research institution. So again, the solicitation provides that guidance. Make sure you read that and understand it.
I can add to that, Scott. You'll find it in Chapter 1, and it has to be more than 50% for the PI.
All right, thank you. We have a couple of questions related to firms that may already have a technology or an idea that is relatively developed, may even be almost to the commercial stage. Is there a way to go direct to phase 2?
You know, we get that question a lot as well. So NASA does not have congressional authority to do what we call direct to phase 2s. There are other federal agencies within the SBIR, STTR ecosystem that can do that because Congress granted them that authority. So they can allow for firms to bypass phase 1 and go straight to phase 2. We do not have that authority at this present time. So in order to get things rolling, you would have to apply for phase 1 first and then apply for phase 2 second.
Okay, thank you. Can a small business apply to both the SBIR and STTR with the same innovation? And if not, can we apply to different innovations, one to SBIR and one to STTR?
So the second one is easy. Yes, if you have different innovations, you can apply to both programs as you see fit. For the first one, if it's the same innovation, you need to really take a look at the subtopic, the research area that we have outlined within the solicitations, and really make sure that it fits appropriately. And if you submit a proposal to both of them and the proposal is identical, you need to let us know, and we may have to figure out, we can't fund 2 projects with the same work, right? So that wouldn't work well. So if you do that, you would tell us that you're submitting the same proposal to SBIR and STTR, and then you would need to, we would have, if both were selected, let's say, then we would have to come up with a game plan on which program you would actually go with, because we can't fund both of those projects. Kate, you want to add anything else?
Or
Dina, go ahead.
Sure. And in the solicitation, it does really clearly state the what happens if you do with multiple proposals. And it really just keep in mind, it needs to be a unique proposal, a unique innovation and responsive to the subtopic. So multiple proposals that are exactly the same may get disqualified. So make sure that it's unique and responsive to that subtopic.
Yeah, that's correct. Make sure that like I said, read that subtopic and make sure that that technology really does apply to it. We don't know, we're not sure that happens all that often.
Okay, and related, if we do apply for multiple SBIRs or STTRs, can the PI be the same on those proposals?
Dina, you want to take that one?
I was going to defer to you. I think if it's selected, you have to have 50% or more. So I don't think it's actually possible. But if there's more to that you want to add.
Yeah, I was going to say this, how do you, one of the things we're going to be looking at is if those two projects were selected or multiple projects were selected, and it's the same PI, we're going to be looking at, how can you actually be working on all these same projects? And, there's rules related to that. So it's probably best not to go down that route.
Yeah, I would add the same. The PI is probably the most key personnel, and if they're spread too thin, that might not look favorably.
And it potentially
for the work.
Yeah, it potentially jeopardizes the work and it won't get done.
Okay, easy question. Period of performance, SBIR 6 months, STTR 13 months. Is that the mandatory period of performance or the max period of performance?
It's kind of both. It is the it's our mandatory period of performance. And that is the maximum amount of time that you can get for an SBIR or an STTR. Now, what'll happen is if you receive an award, the contract will be very clear at phase 1. It'll stipulate that at the end of your 6-month period of performance for SBIR, you're required to submit the deliverables for the project, as well as that is the exact time that you would submit your phase 2 proposal to us. We base that on the end date of that period of performance. Same thing for STTR. So on that 13th month, when that period of performance ends, that's the date that you're submitting that phase 2 proposal to us for STTR. There are some ways that you can get an extension through the contracting rules. However, any extension you receive does not apply to when the proposals are due to us for phase 2. Just may give you a little bit more time to submit a final report or close out the project, but the phase 2 proposals are still due on the original period of performance end date. So that's kind of a critical thing I think firms need to understand when reviewing and planning. You need to make sure that you're ready to submit that phase 2 proposal on the end of the original period of performance end date.
Thank you. Some STTR specific questions. Does working with university students count as a research institution partnership?
Well, so it depends. When you submit your STTR proposal, you're going to see a requirement in the solicitation that you have a research, an RI agreement in place. And essentially that agreement is the agreement between the small business and the research institution, and it shows how the research institution will be participating on the project. So it's very possible that as you're executing the project, part of that research agreement states that you may have, post-grads, graduate students, maybe even undergrad students conducting some of the lab work, doing some of the testing of the technology, whatever it may be. But the research institution, the actual university, academic university, or whoever it is, they're the ones that actually are dictating to the small business how that work is going to be done. So you still have to kind of work through the management at the RI in order to get that work, get that agreement in place and get it signed, because it has to be signed by the university officials as part of the proposal. Anything else on that, Dina or Kate?
Nope.
No.
Good.
And then a direct follow on to that is somebody sees they need to submit a research agreement and endorsement, and they just want to know, is there a format or template for that, or do they use any format?
So we provide some instructions in the solicitation on how to get the RI agreement in place. And there can be some differences. Some RI agreements might change a little bit depending on how you're working with them, but we do provide instructions on how to get that into place.
Okay, great, thank you. And we have time for one more question before we move on, and this is something that comes up regularly. Are letters of intent from third parties interested in our technology something useful that can lead to a recommendation for funding? Should we include letters of support in our phase 1 proposal?
I could take that. Oh.
Yeah, go ahead, Dina.
We actually discourage it. It's not part of our review. So if it's submitted, it's going to get counted against your proposal page limit, and we won't really be taking a look at it. So there's language in there in the solicitation that says letters of funding support are not required or desired. So if you decide to, it'll just count against your page limit and not really help you.
Yep. Yeah, it's a good point. And, remember at phase 1, we're really focusing on the technology development here, feasibility. As you start to grow the technology, if you get funded and you start to move into phase 2, then that's where we're really going to start wanting to see some letters of interest from outside investors or other funding opportunities. So, through your phase 1, you'll be wanting to think about, what are those other markets out there? Who else is interested in this technology that can actually support it? Where NASA may not be the only buyer of it, we might be able to find another industry. And that's a great segue into the next section of the presentation. Quite honestly, as I'm going to go through some of that here in a minute, as to why you want to take advantage of some of our additional opportunities, because that will help you to identify how to come up with these letters for your phase 2 submission that you hopefully will be able to submit in the future. So.
Well, I am glad that I could set you up so well, Scott. So I guess back to our presentation.
Yeah, that was an awesome way to do it. I don't think that was planned. So nice job.
Thank you.
All right, so let's do that. So let's go into the next fun part, which is additional opportunities. All right, so as I was mentioning, there are some opportunities that you as a firm probably need to be taking advantage of, both at phase 1, and then this one particularly is available also at phase 2, but this is our technical and business assistance program. Our solicitation has all this information in chapter 1, chapter 1.8, and then also in chapter 3, which is 3.5.8, and you can really understand what the details here are. But basically what TABA does, it provides an opportunity for you to stay focused on your research and development while you're developing the technology at phase 1, because we've learned over time that 6-month period of performance is not a lot of time for you to be distracted on other things. You're kind of hyper-focused on getting that proof of concept, that feasibility understood. And so what TABA does, it allows you to utilize a vendor to help shape your commercialization roadmap as you move forward. So what that means is understand where the technology is going in the future. Are you going to be selling it only to federal government? Are you going to be selling it to private industry, or maybe both? A lot of our firms don't pay attention to this, and it's very critical because when you submit a phase 2 proposal to us, there's a requirement that you submit what's called a commercialization and business plan. This document, this part of the proposal, we see a lot of firms just gloss over it. They provide us no information because they have not thought through how to commercialize that technology and move it forward. SBIR is focused on specifically, and STTR specifically, on commercializing these innovations and making sure that they got a useful life after the SBIR program has provided funding to move them forward. So what we're trying to do here is with TABA is strengthen your ability to apply for future phase 2 and post phase 2, phase 2 and phase 3 funding. So that's that commercialization piece. And then also put in place strategies to commercialize in both the federal and NASA relevant markets. What this will do is that you can select a vendor or multiple vendors to help you with product sales, develop IP protections, market research, market validation, and development of regulatory and manufacturing plans. All of these things are important for the technology to be commercialized. And if you're not thinking about that at phase 1, because it's hard to do, use some of the money that we're going to give you to get you geared up and ready to deal with that, and allow a vendor to help you do that. So requesting TABA. So small business may request up to $6,500 at phase 1, and this is done over and above the award amount. Now you're probably going, oh my God, $6,500. That is like not enough money to do hardly anything. Particularly when the list that I provided on the last slide was like IP protection and marketing plans, and that's not a lot of money. But this is the limit that Congress put on the program. But what we are seeing is that firms that use this funding have a good way of utilizing it at phase 1 to help them be successful for phase 2. And so what we're asking for, what we typically encourage firms to do is, you need to understand how you might use TABA at phase 2. And here's the reason why. You can get $50,000 of TABA support at phase 2. $6,500 for phase 1, but you can get $50,000 at phase 2. So if you get that phase 2 award, that's a good chunk of change to help you with IP protection, developing marketing plans, developing manufacturing plans, figuring out the commercial market, and so forth. So what we typically do is we request companies to think about how you might do that at phase 1. And what we do is we ask you to find a third-party vendor. We're going to review who that vendor is, and we have to approve it. And we provide all that information in the solicitation. And the other thing to note is that if you request TABA, we don't review the TABA request during the technical evaluation at phase 1. We don't care at that point. It's not going to have any value to us on whether the proposal is selected or not, because it's a support service to you if you are selected. So what we encourage you to do is use that $6,500 to find a vendor and help you develop what's called a phase 2 TABA needs assessment. And the goal of this assessment is say, okay, if I get a phase 2 proposal, how am I going to use that $50K to move my technology forward? And then also, the other thing I mentioned is that you have to submit a phase 2 commercialization and business plan. This is a required part of your phase 2 submission. And use that firm as that vendor, that TABA vendor, as a way to help you develop that piece of the proposal for phase 2. And get another set of eyes on that and submit that with the proposal. So $6,500, I know is not a lot, but what we are finding is a lot of the vendors out there are willing to use it to help you prepare and get ready for future activities under a phase 2. And so doing the TABA needs assessment or the commercialization and business plan, those seem to be pretty easy for folks to do and within the means of the $6,500. We also don't require you to only do this. If you have other things you want to spend the money on, that $6,500, you can do that as well. The solicitation is very clear on what you can do there, and you can propose that as well. I-Core, so another great opportunity. This is found in chapters 1.7 and then also 3.5.3.9. Essentially, we encourage our firms to participate in this training. And what this is training with the National Science Foundation. And it's designed to lower the market risk that comes with bringing an innovation to market. Thereby, you can improve your chances of a viable business model. So basically, this is all about customer discovery, understanding what the customer needs are, obtain that understanding, and increase your value proposition for the technology you're developing and how you might put it out into that commercial market. So we unfortunately don't have a lot of firms that take us up on this opportunity, and we do get firms that come through it, and the success stories that come out of I-Corps is in general been really, really good. So we have an abbreviated competition for I-Corps after the phase 1 selections are made, and we'll provide instructions on how to apply in the solicitation. So reason why I mentioned this is that these opportunities, we have less than 15% of the firms actually take advantage of these opportunities. We're not sure why that is. These are things that are great for you. So we'd like to see you take advantage of these and help yourself be successful in both, federal and non-federal commercial markets. So we strongly encourage you to review these opportunities and consider applying for them in your proposal. So with that, that moves us into our next Q&A session for any questions related to I-Corps and TABA. So if you have any questions on those, put those in the Q&A box, and I'll see Kate and Dina come back here.
And we're back. All right. We're ready for TABA questions we'll start with. Is TABA only available to winners of phase 1 or to any small business?
So TABA, we can only provide it if you receive an award from NASA for a phase 1 contract. So, but any small business can apply for it, right? You can put it in your proposal, but unfortunately the money is only available for those who win an award.
Okay. And the TABA funds for phase 1 and 2, is that for all U.S. government SBIRs or just NASA?
That is for all federal SBIR programs. So that was what's mandated across all the 11 federal agencies that run an SBIR program.
All righty. Can we apply to TABA to cover IP development, patent submission, patent fees, that type of thing?
That is the great thing about this. Yes. And as a matter of fact, we have had firms decide to use at phase 2, the 50K, or even at phase 1 to start the process for developing the IP protections. And so we've had TABA vendors that have been submitted to us that were actually law firms. The law firm was a patent attorney, and they were getting ready to start that process for the patent protection. And that's perfectly legal and allowable under this program.
And very helpful.
Yes.
Okay. A couple related questions. So is there a list of TABA vendors that NASA contractors have used in the past? And if so, can that list be made available to public? And if not, are there resources that people can go to find a TABA vendor?
Yeah, so we understand that this is can be a tough thing for firms to figure out what's a good TABA vendor versus maybe a vendor that you're not sure about. Unfortunately, NASA does not publish any lists, or we don't have a preferred vendor that we use like some of the other federal agencies out there do. What you can do, though, is you can go to the Small Business Administration. If you just go to SBIR.gov, there's a list of resources there for entrepreneurial help. So that might lead you to some potential vendors. The other thing you can also do is take a look at what some of the other federal agencies are doing with their TABA programs. Some of them actually have a preferred vendor that they're using, and you may be able to just make a direct connection to that preferred vendor for those other agencies and reach out to them and say, hey, I'm applying for a NASA SBIR. I'm looking for a vendor. Could I find out what your capabilities and qualifications are? So that's another option that you could do. The third option that you have is you could actually just do a simple Google search. And if you do, SBIR TABA, you'll get a list of vendors that will pop up. And then unfortunately, it's on you all as a proposer to start kind of weeding through that information and figuring out which potential vendors you think can satisfy the needs of what you're looking for. So you have to spend a little bit of time on this, a little bit of research. It's, you know, the luxury of a preferred vendor from an agency is not there under NASA at this point in time. So you have to spend some time figuring out which vendor you might want to use for this. So that's why, you know, have a plan, start making sure that you get that plan together, and don't allow this to kind of hinder your ability to submit a proposal to us.
Okay, thank you. There were a couple questions around, can TABA funds be allocated to the same firm that was awarded the SBIR, or does it have to be a third-party vendor? And a related one, it sounded like TABA funds can be directed to TABA scope in-house within either the prime or a subcontractor.
Yeah, so that's not correct. The statute's very clear that you can only use TABA funds for a third-party vendor. So you cannot use the funds in-house or with the the awardee, whoever receives the firm, the small business that receives receives the award from NASA may not use those funds in-house. They have to go to a third-party vendor. So, and we describe that pretty clearly in the solicitation as well. So,
okay. Can we use two different companies or vendors for TABA support for different components?
yes, you can.
Okay. And a couple questions, and I think we touched on it, but when would TABA funds expire? My company has done many phase 1 and phase 2 awards, but I don't think we realized or utilized these resources. And another had asked if they could get it after the phase 1 is done and they possibly didn't get awarded a phase 2.
Yeah, so TABA funding is only available at the time of award, and the funding would expire at the end of the period of performance. So 6,500 is available once you get the award, and then it expires 6 months later for SBIR or 13 months later for STTR. If you have received a prior award or didn't request TABA in the past, there's no retroactive way to obtain those funds. So you have to submit the information within the proposal, and that's the only way we can get those to you. So it's based on each solicitation. So, Dina, anything to add? I know I'm taking over on TABA because that's kind of my
Yeah, no,
so.
you were answering exactly how I would have and more. So
okay, good. You're the I-Core expert, so maybe we'll have some I-Core questions.
And great timing. I was just going to move on to I-Core to make sure we get a couple of those in. So easy first question. Do you need to indicate in the phase 1 proposal that you intend to apply for I-Core?
Yes, you do. There is a opt-in interest form, and it's actually one of the requirements for a complete proposal. So make sure to indicate that you're interested at that time. That way we can have you invited back to the full proposal if you are selected for award.
Okay. Is there a way of participating in I-Core without winning or applying for an SBIR STTR award?
No, not at this time. It's, again, like TABA, it's only offered to phase 1 awardees, and it's based on the solicitation. So it will have to be only available after the phase 1 awardees are selected.
Okay. Is time involved in I-Core not billable to the SBIR STTR contract?
So that's a good question. I might have to go back, and unless you have an answer, Scott or Kate, we'll have to look a little more further into that and provide an answer.
Yeah, I would just say that we award a grant on top of the actual phase 1 award to cover a lot of the costs associated with I-Core, be it labor or travel or that type of thing. So it would not be part of the actual award.
Good point. Thanks, Kate.
Yep. Can we apply to I-Corps if we are selected for a phase 2 STTR?
That would be in the phase 2 solicitation if it's offered at that point. Right now, we do not have that.
All right, and we're gonna wrap this up, but I have a related question that I just kind of wanted to get in here. It sounds like somebody has already been through I-Corps, and through the customer discovery, there's limited potential for commercial market applications, but they still feel that it's a strong fulfillment of the NASA topic. Is there still a strong case for them proposing if NASA might be the only customer?
Sure, of course, we're always looking for infusion commercialability as well. So even if there's not a commercial market and outside in the marketplace, and it is responsive to a subtopic, we really encourage you to apply.
All right, thank you. Back to you, Scott.
All righty, that was fun. As you can see, my heart's with Taba. And I love I-Corps too, by the way. All right, okay, let's move into the next fun part. Technical requirements. Okay, as I mentioned in the ground rules, this webinar will not cover specifics related to technologies, research areas, or proposed innovations. As a reminder, NASA is in a blackout period and is prohibited from discussing proposal specifics with any potential offerer, including how your proposed innovation does or does not meet a technical need expressed in the solicitation. We take this constraint seriously in order to maintain the integrity of the competitive process and to ensure offers receive fair and equitable treatment. Although we won't get into specifics, I do want to spend a few minutes addressing a couple common questions around this subject before we transition from this PowerPoint to the live demo, which is what I'm going to do next. So we often get these questions that's up on the slide here is, how do I get more information about the technical requirements of the solicitation subtopics? And we've clearly indicated, chapter 7 there. And, once the solicitation is released, that document is your source for the technical requirements for the SBIR and STTR contracts. Beyond that, what is available to you during this time or any time are any publicly available resources that may provide additional context for the technical needs of the agency, each mission directorate, or the centers at NASA. And that's the reason why we list chapter 7 is because you can find some of these resources noted within that chapter. So we'd ask you to take a look there, give you a little bit more, if you're just learning about NASA, trying to understand it, the agency, that's a great place to go is chapter 7 and start looking that information over. The next question we often get is, why doesn't NASA have a technical Q&A period? And the answer to that is really, due to schedule and staffing constraints, NASA has not historically held a pre-solicitation Q&A period. And unfortunately, once the solicitation is open, we are in that blackout period on technical content, which is as I keep describing. However, as we continue to expand our webinar series and other efforts to grow our support to offers and awardees, we look forward to perhaps including some technical discussions in future webinars. So we talk about it all the time. It's something we're very interested in figuring out how to do, but we just haven't been able to figure it out at this point in time. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go through with a live demonstration of the website. And the goal here is to really help you understand how to maneuver through the website and start the process of figuring out the solicitations and so forth. So on the screen, what you'll see now is our main page. So it's just sbir.nasa.gov. And you're just going to come under the solicitations link, which is right here. If I can get it to click for me, there we go. And once the page loads here, what you'll see is the solicitations that we have. So I'm not sure why it's not loading for me. There we go. And if you scroll down, we'll talk a little bit about the program itself and the solicitations, but what you really want to start to notice is that this is where we've got the two separate solicitations. So on the left-hand side here, we have the SBIR solicitation. On the right-hand side, we have STTR. Now, earlier in the presentation, I mentioned that I would tell you how you can get to the electronic handbook. Right now, this is your first way you can do it, is right here down at the bottom, you'll see proposal submission EHB. You click on that link and that'll take you to the system itself. And that's when you can start to register if you're new and or update your registrations in the EHB and then start the process to submit a proposal. We're very clear on the website that when we posted the solicitation and when we plan to make the announcements. And then the last thing I'll note is that we do list the previous solicitations down below in case you did want to take a look at any of those older ones. So let's start with SBIR. So you can click anywhere within this area, and if you click on that, what will open up is the SBIR solicitation. There's a couple things you can do here. You can do a search if you're looking for any information related to a technology, and you can design that search how you want using the search function. The other thing we have is you can download these solicitations as a PDF file or a Word file. So if you just click on those, you'll get a large document that will now take up space on your hard drive. But a lot of people like to do that, and it's perfectly fine if you do. The other thing we have here is all the different sections of the solicitation. So you can see the cover page, the executive summary, and then chapters 1 through 9. So this is where you go through and you'll find the information. So if we just click on chapter 1, that just will go into the same information that you would find in the PDF or Word document that you downloaded. It's easy to read. You should be able to get through it. It'll talk a little bit about the different programs. And then, here's availability of funding for SBIR, eligibility requirements. We had some of those things come up in those earlier questions that talks about all the information is there. And what you'll see is that there's a lot more information here than we can cover in our presentation. Place of performance and American-made products and equipment. We didn't cover that in this presentation in the slides, but this is very pertinent information that you need to know about as you get ready to submit a proposal. So what we'll do is I'll just hit the back button and go back out to the main page again. The next thing I want to kind of go through is our chapter 9 section. And this is where you'll find the research topics. And this is where you can, this is kind of a big section of the proposal. So that's maybe why it's taken a second or two to load up here. There it goes. So what we do here is you'll see that we have some legends. You'll see that subtopics that have an A, there's a numbering system we use. So if there's an A or an H or an S or a Z, that corresponds to the specific mission directorate. We also have things that are called subtopic pointers. And if there's any amendments that have been done to that subtopic. Currently, we don't have any amendments in the solicitation since we just recently released it. What you'll then do is you can just scroll down. Again, you'll see same kind of thing related to the mission directorates. And then here we have our research topics areas. Excuse me. These are broken out by focus areas. So if you're looking, let's say you're developing a technology that really focuses on power, energy, storage of energy, like batteries as an example, then focus area 2 might be where you want to start to look. And what we do under here is we give a general overview of what this focus area is about. That's that introductory paragraph. And then as you scroll down, you'll start to see these are the types of technology areas that we're looking for as it relates to storage of energy, batteries, generation of electricity, things like that. So we got our first one here. This is the Science Mission Directorate, 1307, Energy Storage of Extreme Environments. If you want to learn more about that, you just click the Read More, and it gives you the full scope and description of what the areas that we're looking for technologies are. We often have questions come up from firms regarding TRL levels. That's technology readiness levels. So that means, you know, a 1 at the a 1 TRL means the technology is, you know, basically it's something you're drawing on a piece of paper, right? Or maybe a napkin at a dinner table. This is the idea. And then you got a TRL that goes all the way up to like 9. That's something that's ready to go and is on a spacecraft and is on its way on a mission, right? It's done, it's over with. That technology's been completed all the way through. We try to give you a good idea of at the end of a phase 1, we like to see TRL levels like on this one between a 3 and a 5. We also have some taxonomies related to the program and how it relates to agency-wide initiatives. So you can take a look at that. And we have a part of the solicitation, one of the appendices talks about the taxonomies if you want to dig into that. Also go through desired deliverables, what we were looking for at the end of a phase 1, and then what a phase 2 would potentially look like at the end. You know, what are the deliverables we want for a phase 2? The state of the art and critical gaps is where NASA describes our understanding of this particular issue. And that's one of the kind of the cool things about our program is that we may think we know everything, but sometimes we don't. And so the critical gaps and state of the art as our understanding, you may come in and say, well, we got an idea and we got a technology that will actually make that state of the art and critical gap be complete or move that level up in the state of the art and maybe be a disruptor to the current state of the art or something along those lines. Relevance and science traceability, just an overview of things that we plan to, you know, what we'd like to use those for as we move forward. And then there's always a reference section that's provided. As you scroll down, you'll see the other subtopics here. And then one thing I just want to point out is we tell you that this is an SBIR subtopic. And then we also have a subtopic pointer here. So what that means is that for this one, which is photovoltaic power generation and conversion, photovoltaic power generation and conversion, our HEO mission directorate has a subtopic that is kind of similar. And so you can click on that and it'll take you to that one. And so there's some similarity between these two. They're different, but there might be something here that you might want to check into. And so on a lot of these, like if you look at Z405, you'll see there's a lot of other subtopics that might have some similarity to this one for non-destructive evaluation sensors, modeling and analysis. So this gives you an idea that you can kind of start looking at things and we can point you in different directions on what some other subtopics might be that can relate to that. Now, if you look at subtopics and you see a T in here, that stands for STTR. That means there's a subtopic maybe under the STTR program that might be one you want to check out. So that is how you navigate the solicitation, pretty straightforward. The other thing you can do is you can click on this link and you can sort things by mission directorate. So let's say you want to just go in and look at, you know, the aeronautics research mission directorate. All of their subtopics are now listed in numerical order. You can go through and take a look at those and see if anything there meets your fancy. Most of our firms, I believe, are using the focus area methodology, but again, we give you an option just in case on how, you know, just in case you want to try it a different way. All right, so with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click back on solicitations, and I just want to show you the STTR version of the solicitation. So as soon as that comes up here, there we go. And so we have the STTR on the right-hand side, same kind of format, same information. The document will come up when you click on it. And again, same kind of format. You got the different chapters, so you click on chapter 1. And what you'll notice is when you read through this language, the authority is different for STTR than SBIR. You'll also go through here and you'll start to see that there's some differences in the availability of funds. Eligibility requirements are different. Some of this, like restrictions on participation are different. And that was one of the big reasons why we separated these out, because those were getting kind of buried in the singular documents that we had before. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this left-hand side here, and I'm just going to go to research topics. You open that up. And here you'll see that it's a little bit different than SBIR. We don't sort any of these by mission directors because, as I mentioned in an earlier slide, STTR is basically focused using only the centers. The NASA centers are the ones who help develop this solicitation. So rather than listing all 10 centers, we just do it only by focus area in STTR. And again, the same kind of idea here is you just look through the focus areas. Now you'll notice that STTR is a smaller program than SBIR, less focus areas, although they have one that's only specific to them, and that's focus area 23. So you might want to check that out if you work in digital transformation, in the digital transformation arena. Come down here, same kind of idea as I showed before. You can read the scope description for a specific subtopic. So this is model-based enterprise, and give you all the information that you need. We also give you the TRLs, taxonomy, the description of deliverables, state-of-the-art critical gaps, and the relevant science traceability. And then we also have references that are here as well. So you should be able to navigate this, find what you're looking for, and go from there. Also, I'm gonna scroll down a little bit more here. We do have those subtopic pointers. I don't see any in this area because this is a subtopic that's very specific to STTR, but let's click a different one. So let's go to communications and navigation. And again, you'll see here for quantum communications, we have an STTR subtopic, but then we also have quantum type of information or research areas that we're looking for in these other subtopics. And most of these, except for these last two, are in the SBIR program. So if you're working in the area of quantum technology or quantum innovations, there's a lot of possible opportunities of places you might want to submit a proposal to. So with that, last thing I'll do is I just want to show the appendices. Here, as I mentioned, we have the technology readiness levels. We give a description there. The taxonomies are listed. We do list potential transition and infusion opportunities. This section here is really, I'm sorry, well, it's going to make you download that as an appendice. But what that is that's a section of the solicitation that just gives you an idea of what potential opportunities exist for some of these for technology that come through some of these subtopics. It's not that we're focusing on those as far as, you know, when we make selections, we're really basing it on the actual solicitation itself, and that's why these are appendices. And then the last thing we have is phase 1 clauses, regulations, and certifications. These are things that you just need to be aware of if you receive a contract. You're going to have to be understand the different FAR clauses and regulations that come with working with the federal government. So we list those in there in the solicitation for you to reference as well. So I think with that, that is the overview of the how the solicitations work and how you can get to them. So I think we're going to transition back over to another Q&A. And let me get the PowerPoint slide back up and running. So again, walk through those. And now we're at Q&A session 3. So after that demonstration, if you have any questions, put those in the Q&A box. And then just a reminder, after this Q&A session, we'll conclude with a brief summary of key takeaways as you prepare to submit a phase 1 proposal, followed by a fourth and final Q&A session for any remaining questions you have. So, Kate, back to you.
All right, Q&A number 3, we're going to talk about the focus areas and subtopics and the demo that Scott just did. So we will start with, I know you touched on this, but maybe just to tie it all together, where do the topics come from that end up in SBIRs and STTRs?
Yeah, so we work, so I'll bucket it in 2 areas. So SBIR, we work directly with our mission directorates. We have 4 of them: Science Mission Directorate, science technology, our HEO, which is our human exploration folks, and then we have our aeronautics mission directorate. So all four of those mission directorates, they make a call out to their subtopic managers or their subject matter experts within their mission directorates, and those are where we get the subtopics from. They're generated, and there's a whole process where we get subtopics that are nominated for the solicitation. There's a process of review and selection. So not every subtopic that's nominated will make it into the solicitation. And then, at the end of the day, we present those to our management, which is our source selection official. And the source selection official will make the final determination on what subtopics will end up in the solicitation, and that's what we end up publishing. Anything else on that, Dina or Kate?
No.
No, I think that covers it. All right. We see a topic that is under SBIR. We were actually hoping to submit an STTR. Is that allowed?
I could take that.
Yep.
Oh.
Go ahead, Dina.
Sure. Okay. No, it's not allowed. And there's actually some language in the solicitation that refers to this. The proposals need to be responsive to the subtopic. So if it is in SBIR and you try to submit it to STTR, there won't be a corresponding subtopic to submit it to. And also, we don't transfer any proposals from one program to the other. So it's just not possible during submissions as well.
And Kate, if you don't mind, I just realized I forgot to describe the STTR process for subtopics from your prior question. So for STTR, it basically runs the same way, except for we're getting those subtopics from the centers, the 10 centers. And there's also a review and selection process and a final determination by the SSO for those as well. So just wanted to clarify that. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. All related. And to just build on what Dina said, you can still partner. Like if you have a partnership with a research institution and the subtopic happens to be under SBIR, you can partner with that RI as your subcontractor. It wouldn't be the same kind of relationship as you have in an STTR, and it would be the RI wouldn't be able to do quite as much of the work because of the subcontracting limitations, but you could still partner with them.
And it has to be less than 1/3. So the subcontracting percentage is 33% as a maximum.
Great. Okay, for subtopics with multiple research areas, are you expected to provide solutions for all of them or just one, or what should you address?
Yeah, that's a tough one for me. The best thing I can tell you is that try to figure out where you're most competitive under that subtopic. We do recognize that we have subtopics that have a lot of different things that they're asking for within it, and it is something that we are taking a look at within the program and trying to figure out how to not have that happen as much. But we haven't been able to get that figured out as well as I'd like it to be, quite honestly. So what you need to do is just, take a look at that subtopic. If there is a specific thing that they're asking for, even if it's within a bunch of them, that means that most likely that research topic, they are looking to fund many things within it. And so you still may be very competitive, even though there could be other things in there that you can't address. There may be multiple things that are being funded within that subtopic. So don't always let that deter you from submitting. Figure out your competitive advantage and submit a proposal based on what you think you can achieve, even if a subtopic lists out a whole lot of things that they're looking for. I don't know if Dina or Kate, you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think that's good. And then a different spin on that. How closely should we align with the focus area or the subtopic? If an innovation would be valuable to NASA, but not exactly aligned as defined, should we still submit? Is there still a chance of getting an award?
Dina, you want to try that one?
Sure. How closely aligned with the focus area or subtopic? I would say very much so the subtopic. So the review and selection criteria is listed out, and it's really based on how you respond to the state, advancing the state of the art, or also the science and traceability sections. So I would focus there. Scott walked you through those sections on the website. And yes, apply. And if it's a good alignment there, then you'll have a good chance to make it through the administrative review and onto the review of the technical piece. So Scott, more to add?
Yeah, the only thing I would just say is you really want to try to be responsive to the subtopic. We do often see proposals that'll come in that aren't really being responsive to that subtopic or the research area. And in general, they probably won't make it through the selection process. So, try to figure out your competitive edge and make sure that whatever you're applying to is responsive. The other thing I would also point out is when you're putting your proposal in the EHB, check, double check, triple check that you've selected the correct subtopic for your proposal. This is a problem that we've also see is that, I think a lot of it's because, so many people wait to the last day. There's in the EHB, you actually have to tell us which subtopic you're responding to, and they're not, the offer, the firm isn't paying attention, and they select a different subtopic, and then all of a sudden that proposal shows up in that one, and the reviewers are looking at it and say, this has nothing to do with what we asked for. Your proposal automatically gets kicked out pretty much at that point, and we won't switch it. We can't switch it at that point to the correct subtopic. So make sure you have a good, clear understanding of which one you're submitting to and that you're responding appropriately to it.
Thank you. Next question. Our technology is applicable to more than one subtopic. If we apply to multiple, should we make reference to our other applications, seeing that they go together?
So this kind of goes back to that earlier question that, Dina, that you brought up about duplication. Do you want to cover that again?
Sure. Yeah. So these are standalone proposals. We're not grouping them together for the subtopics. So they need to be unique and responsive to the subtopic. So if you have a innovation that can be responsive to multiple subtopics, go ahead and apply, but make sure that they're specific to that subtopic, and they should be, you don't need to link them together at all. There's no place to do that.
Yeah, and one other thing that we have seen too, and this is, I'm giving you some takeaways already, is don't just duplicate a proposal over and over and over and submit it to multiple subtopics, right? We've seen that, and that doesn't work well for the firm. Make sure you're changing the way the way your proposal reads, and that it's clearly describing how it's meeting the needs of that specific subtopic. The subtopics may be very similar in nature, and so you may feel like, well, I could just save some time and just submit the same proposal to two, but it doesn't work that way because there are nuances and there are different technologies that we're looking for in these things within these research areas, and so you got to make sure that each of those proposals are very unique and are addressing the specifics of the subtopic. Whereas if you just duplicate it over and over and over, chances are you're not meeting that need, that requirement.
Okay, we have just a couple of minutes left in this session, so I want to get to a couple more directly related to the live demo. We often get questions about browser recommendations, and the general answer is Chrome is preferred and Firefox secondary for performance. For those on a Mac, you should know that Safari is not recommended. And then beyond that, I know you guys will appreciate this question. Can someone start inputting to the EHB right now with the idea of go slow and finish early, or should you wait until you have all the required documents ready before you start in the EHB.
I'm gonna let Dina take that one.
I'm like doing the head no and yes. So absolutely get started early. You can go in right now, right this second. Figure out that you can have an EHB account set up and the registrations, start working on the proposal. And then, you can go back in multiple times and update as necessary. Also, you can, I don't know if I'm getting ahead here, but you can also complete and submit your proposal. And if you need an update it, you can do that later. Don't be one of those 78% of the companies and firms that come in and do it on the last day. So yes, absolutely go in today.
Yeah, and just a couple of other little things to note too. When we talked about the registrations, remember there's external parties that you got to work with. So you got SAM.gov. You have to register with the Small Business Administration. So you want to, those are things that you probably want to really focus on early on and get those taken care of quickly, because that's information that you will need for your EHB submission. But not low and slow, going slow, whatever, however you want to do it, is perfectly fine. And like Dina said, you can save information and come back later and update it and so forth. One thing I'd also like to mention, we've seen this as well. So here's another takeaway, is that we've had firms that have made changes to their proposal after they submitted it, right? Like you submitted it, let's say 5 days in advance of the deadline, and then you realize, oh, there's something else I want to add or change. So when you come in and you make that change, you have to redo all of your endorsements and make sure that you recertify the changed proposal. So whatever you certified before on the earlier submission, that's null and void at that point. So you have to come back in and recertify and re-endorse everything on the changed proposal. So if you're one of those 78% that's doing things on the last day, that right there can hang you up big time, and you may not get that new proposal in on time. So just keep, this is systems, these are processes that have to be done. Just keep those in mind as you're moving forward.
And if you have any question on whether you did it all the way complete, you do get a acknowledgement email that your proposal has been received and complete package received. So if you don't get an email, probably an endorsement was not completed, or if you think that you 100% did all the endorsements, the final endorsements, contact the help desk so that they can verify for you.
Yep.
All right. And that ends that Q&A session. So we'll go back to the presentation, Scott.
All right. That was fun. All right. Key takeaways. So with that, I want to just start off with a little quote from William Shakespeare. It's not in the stars to hold our destiny, but it's in ourselves. And when I read this, it clearly states that you're the one in charge. You're the one that has to make sure that you're meeting the requirements of the solicitation. You're the one that's got to get things done on time. And so I think that quote really kind of holds true, that as you move forward, make sure that you spend time reading the research areas, determine which solicitation you want to apply under, whether it's SBIR or STTR. Carefully review the solicitation you're applying under in its entirety. We've highlighted that many times today, and we're going to continue to enforce that. Remember, this webinar does not supersede the solicitation. The solicitation is the guide, or as I like to say, your Bible, to get these things done and know what you need to do. Remember that there are differences between the programs, between SBIR and STTR, and there are different rules. So that's why you want to make sure you understand those solicitations in their entirety. And there are additional rules that we did not cover in this webinar, and therefore it's important to review and fully understand the solicitation. I highlighted one when we did the live demo about all work has to be done in the United States, and American-made equipment and purchases need to be considered as a high priority with your proposal. That was in section 1. those are other rules that apply that we couldn't even cover in this webinar. So make sure you're looking at that and reading those documents, those 2 solicitations in depth. Plan ahead. I can't stress this enough. Complete all the requirements in the solicitation, your registrations, your certifications, and then again, submit early. Don't be one of the 78%ers who are not getting stuff in on time. And why add that stress to yourself on the last day? Would really like to see that number start coming down, quite honestly. Take advantage of the additional opportunities the program offers. TABA, excellent opportunity, as is I-Corps. Both of these can really help you all, not only in just being successful as an SBIR firm for the specific technology you're developing and moving forward, but with I-Corps, that customer discovery, understanding where those markets are, great opportunity to figure that out. And then with TABA, utilizing outside expertise to help you move things forward. Make sure you use those resources. And then use our available resources. We mentioned Chapter 7. We have the appendice, which has the appendices in the solicitation has information, but we also mentioned SBA has some stuff up on SBIR.gov. There is some resources up there on that page where you could, there's what are called the FAST awardees. This is the FAST program that SBIR program runs. These are companies, these are businesses and organizations that are specifically designed to help small businesses be competitive in the SBIR program. So you could check out their website. There's also other, small business development centers. There's PTACs. These are procurement technology acquisition centers. I think that's what that acronym stands for, but PTACs are there also to help with these kind of things. So there's a lot of opportunity to get some help, not only if you win an award through TABA and I-Corps, but even helping get you ready to submit a proposal. So use those resources that we've provided to you. So there's some other resources that we have. As a reminder, NASA is in a blackout. So while the solicitation is open, so again, individual NASA employees and contractors were prohibited from engaging with you about potential SBIR and STTR proposals, but there's other resources that you should be able to take advantage of during this time and quite frankly, any other time. So a few of them are highlighted here. Again, sign up for our newsletter and other communications and spend time on our website reviewing our resource library and getting inspired by success stories and hearing from participants interviewed as part of our blog series. I have already mentioned the SBA website. So again, our FAST awardees, the PTACs, the Small Business Development Centers, they provide training, consulting, other services, and many of them don't cost you anything. And then finally, if you have a solicitation or other program questions and you haven't been able to find an answer, you can always submit those to our help desk. And if the blackout will allow us to respond to those, we can do that. So before we head into our fourth and final Q&A session, it's always cool to show a little bit of inspiration and some of the things that we've done within the program. So, why do we say SBIR and STTR are a win for all? First, with your help, we can accomplish NASA's many ambitious missions. The 8 technologies highlighted in this image were each developed in part with the NASA SBIR and STTR program, and each flew to Mars on the NASA Perseverance rover. So, each of these small businesses developed a part of that rover, and that thing's now sitting on the Mars landscape or surface of Mars. I think that's what I'm trying to say. So it's just really cool to see something like that come through the program. Every success looks different though. So on the last slide, we are in space, and with this example, NASA funded this technology to benefit Earth science. It's now being sold to commercial customers in agriculture and more. You can read this and our many other success stories on our website, and they're just a small fraction of what good we know is coming out of the program. So with that, I hope today's webinar is helpful to you. I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Kate so we can take any final questions with the time that we have left.
All right, thank you, Scott. This will be our final Q&A session, so be sure to get any last minute questions that you have into the Q&A box now. And a reminder that if we do run out of time before we get to your question, we'll put together answers to key questions, the ones that we are allowed to answer during this blackout period. As reference, there's some that we can't, and we will share those out with the group. With that, let's see. We had a question just in general on, I guess people want to know what their chances are when they get involved in this. So an estimate of percentage of phase 1 proposals funded and percentage of phase 1s that go on to phase 2.
I could take that, or unless you want to. It averages year to year. So for phase 1s, it's typically from 20 to 24% of proposals received actually get an award. And we have much, and that's SBIR. For STTR, it's a little bit higher. It flexes up to 29%. So those are the phase 1 award ratios. For phase 2, those phase 1s that apply and it's almost double to a phase 2. The transition rate is about 40%. It also varies year to year.
Yep. Yeah, it just depends. It just depends on how firms submit to us and so forth. So yeah, it does vary. There's a lot of variation in those numbers.
But the odds are good. Once
Yes.
you get your foot in the door at phase 1, then going on to the other stages is a much better venture.
Yep.
Related to the resources that you just talked about, there is a women-owned business, and they're curious as to whether there are resources at NASA that can help them navigate this process. We know that SBA has some resources specific to women-owned small businesses, but are there any at NASA that you're aware of?
Yeah, specific to our program, no, we don't have a lot of we can't help you develop your proposal or review your proposal before you submit it because the blackout doesn't allow for that. There are some things you can do before a solicitation comes out. You can contact we call them CTTLs. These are our Center Technology Transition Liaisons. We have them listed on our website. You can contact them at any point in time when a solicitation is not published and ask them. You can kind of learn about NASA by having kind of a one-on-one with our CTTL staff. They're, like I said, they're at the centers and they do this all the time. They talk with small businesses that are interested in NASA and just trying to figure out if there's any potential opportunities within the NASA construct that maybe they can submit a proposal under. So that's definitely an opportunity that you can do at this point in time. Dina or Kate, any other ideas?
No.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Kate. Sorry.
I would just add that we also at NASA have an Office of Small Business Programs, and that's not SBIR specific. That's for all small business programs and all opportunities for small businesses to get involved. And they may have some resources as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any limit on the number of proposals any one company can submit?
Yes, 10. We won't accept anything more than 10 from one offer, and we don't plan to select more than 5 from one firm.
Okay. Somewhat related, can a company submit multiple proposals to a topic or subtopic, as long as they are substantially different, and then be eligible to win multiple phase ones in that topic or subtopic area.
So that has happened. We do have some of our firms that receive multiple awards. So again, as long as the technology that you're submitting under that proposal is, is very different from the second proposal or the third proposal, yeah, that could happen. So
hopefully different PIs, but if it's more than two.
Yep, that's a good point, Dina. Yeah, make sure that you've got the PI thing figured out, because you don't want to jeopardize that technology not being completed because you've overstretched your staff as the lead PI.
Okay, thank you. A firm has won a phase one before, but they failed to go to phase two. They found that that subtopic still exists in the new solicitation. So are they able to submit a new phase one proposal with similar technology, as long as it's, updated technical progress or a new partnership, that type of thing?
So you can do that. You want to make sure, though, that whatever you're proposing is different from the original work that you were funded for, because the federal government, by law, can't fund duplication of effort. So we can't, we can't pay for the same work to be done twice, basically is what that's saying. So your new proposal would need to be different, look different than what you had been funded for prior. So that can be done. And we do see firms do that, where they've tweaked the technology or modified it so that it is different from the prior work and has submitted it and moved it forward.
Just keep in mind that it has to be substantially different with innovation, because we don't fund just a furthering of development of an existing technology or product.
That's correct. Yeah, because if we were to do that, then that means that you're not in the proof of concept or feasibility study of a phase one. Your TRL level is most likely way past that.
All right, beautiful lead into the next question. Since a company must apply to phase one, even if they already have the technology developed to a certain point, and phase one is for ideation, feasibility, not technology development, would the company's phase one proposal still be considered if they're already past that initial ideation stage?
I would just recommend really reading what the TRL levels are. So if this is actually a higher TRL, it wouldn't be the right fit for the SBIR program. But if this is a substantial innovation to something that had a TRL 7, and this is going back to maybe 1 or 2, that would be a good fit. I don't know if you want to add more, Scott.
I think you just want to make sure that you're, when that proposal is submitted, that you're really articulating within the proposal why you're still, why you're moving that technology maybe in a different direction, and you're trying to understand how to prove a new proof of concept with it. I speak from that based on my prior experiences at other federal agencies related to SBIR, as I've worked in other SBIR programs, and we've often have seen, a technology that had already been proven, but the firm developed a way to take that proven technology and change it in a way that now they're like, okay, we don't know if this will even work now that we've changed it, but we need that initial seed funding to see if we can make it do something different than what it was originally intended for. So if you're going down that path, then I think you're perfectly fine. If you're just reproposing a technology, like Dina said, that's already at a high level, TRL level, and it's already been demonstrated, and maybe it's already commercially available, it's a no-go. It's probably not gonna, it's too advanced for this program. So just some clarification from my perspective on that.
All right, thank you. Are there any proposal templates available to help see what a winning proposal would look like?
So that's that's hard to do. We have our resource library, and I believe we have a template up there. But you got to remember that proposals often contain a lot of, oh, sorry, my iPad's going off here. I apologize. So I can't get it to turn off. There we go. Okay. So the IP that's in those proposals, those are difficult to show to other firms, right? Like if you have IP in your firm, you don't want that information to be shared. So we can't really, it's hard for us to develop a proposal that we can send out as a template, because that's potentially risking the intellectual property that that firm would have. So the template that we have up there, I don't know how recent it is, but it is one that you could use as a guide to help you get into that, to figure out if that's the way you want to go. Kate, Dina, you want to add anything else to that?
I would just add that, yes, the template is really just an outline to make sure that you have the 10 sections that are required and that type of thing, because each proposal is going to be fairly different. And there was an additional question that asked what visibility is provided into other people's contracts that do win. And Scott addressed a lot of that there, that, there's just information that we can't share, that information belongs to the firm. We have to protect that information. We do post, when we post the selections, we post the abstracts, so you can at least blurb of what type of technologies were selected and were funded, but we can't share full proposals.
Yep.
Okay. Just to help some people understand, could you please clarify the subtopic? Is this equivalent to focus area? So I guess to understand NASA's terminology.
Yeah. So the focus areas are really just a bucket in simplest form, right? It's a bucket area of similar technology that we're looking for. So when I was doing when I was doing the demonstration, I was walking through chapter 9, we had the focus area for energy, power. I don't remember the exact title of it, but anyway, and then you look down and you see the subtopics that are listed there. And those were all subtopics related to the focus area. So you could think of it as the focus area is the bucket. The subtopics are the things that are filling the bucket up with, water in its simplest form.
Yeah. Just the research call and ask for the solicitation, the individual one.
Yeah, and why they're called a subtopic, I don't know. Topic is research area. There's probably a bunch of different names we could probably put on that, but for now, that's what they're titled, or subtopics.
And for folks who applied before, I think that's the typical name is the topics areas that you'll see in other solicitations. It's exactly the same. We call it subtopics.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Some process related questions. So to ask this, because of course this is something they probably need to be doing now, so that they can get in. If we have a UIE, but SAM registration has expired, can we still apply for SBIR, or do we need to renew it?
You must renew that SAM registration. So get that going like ASAP. When you read the solicitation, you're going to see some language in there that specifically states that if you have not registered with SAM.gov and your registration is not active at the time of submission, that makes you ineligible for an award. Now, you can go into you may be able to go into the EHB and just type in any number into the SAM.gov box. But what would happen is that if you were selected for an award and we go back to check to see if your SAM.gov registration was active at the time of submission, then and it's not, then you're not eligible for the award. So it's very critical that you make sure that that step gets done. And that's in the solicitation. It's very clear on the SAM registration, which is part of section 2. You'll see that information there.
Yep, I figured we should stress that.
It
All right.
does take some time too, so allow at least a few weeks or more.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay, going back to the previous question, we had a related one come in while you were answering that other question. So we did focus area versus subtopic. Now we have a question, what is the difference between a subtopic and a scope title?
Okay, yeah, so it's just further levels. So the scope title is the actual description of the subtopic. So when I did the demonstration there, I clicked on the focus area, which was the power one. And then next thing you saw was all the different subtopics. So there was the please read or read more link. I clicked on that. That opened up a long paragraph, which is the scope of that subtopic. And the scope is really the nuts and bolts of what we're asking for as far as innovations to be submitted for that subtopic itself. So,
there's varied amount of scopes within a subtopic. So many of them have only one scope, and many of them have more than one. So it varies depending on what was the need and ask for each subtopic.
That's correct. Yeah, so don't let that hang you up. We have several subtopics with multiple scopes, and it kind of goes back to the earlier question about, how do I deal with a subtopic that's asking for a lot of things? Well, those separate scopes are a lot of things. So you kind of look at each of those different scopes and try to figure out where your competitive advantage is and try to submit a proposal to meet those requirements.
All right. I'm going to sneak one last question in. I'm not sure we can provide a lot of guidance. I think we've provided some already. What are some general suggestions for networking? And some of the questions related to this are like, particularly if you want to hook up with a research institution to do STTR.
So there's a lot of, before the pandemic days, there were a lot of opportunities to get out to conferences. SBIR's program, they ran their national conferences. So there was a lot of opportunity there, but a lot of those things have now gone virtual. So if you go to SBIR.gov website, you can see where they list activities for outreach and things like that. We are also seeing a lot of other agencies are doing virtual one-on-ones, so you can get to know networking with the other agencies as well. And we also do one-on-ones. As I mentioned earlier, you can talk with our CTTLs, about technology development stuff when a solicitation is not actually published. There's opportunities to kind of network along those lines. As far as the research institutions are working with the universities, you'd probably have to do some research to see which RI might be working in the same areas that you're working, and try to see if they've got opportunities to get together and chat with them. I do know that a lot of the TABA vendors that are out there also work with other agencies and so forth. And so you can actually, if you choose a vendor who's got some knowledge related to other federal agency and what's going on in some of those, they may be able to kind of start helping you figure out that network environment that maybe you're going after. And then the FAST awardees and the PTACs and some of the small business development centers that's on SBA's website, same kind of thing there. They're knowledgeable in this entrepreneurial ecospace that belongs to SBIR. They could probably provide you with information as well on where some of those networking options are found too. So it just all kind of depends on where you're focused and what you're looking to do as far as what those network opportunities might be.
All right, thank you. And with that, that's our last question we'll be able to get to today. I want to say a thank you to Scott and Dina for all the great information. And thank you to Bethany, Kim, Nick, and Bailey, who you did not see, but who were behind the scenes pulling this together and making this all go smoothly. And most importantly, I want to thank all of you for being such an engaged and enthusiastic audience. We hope you're walking away from today's session feeling better prepared to submit your phase 1 proposal. As mentioned, we strongly urge you to get started on those submissions now. There's no such thing as too early. And if you're running into any individual issues, please do reach out to our help desk at SBIR@reisystems.com. And I'll ask our team here to drop that email address in the chat for you so you have it. And as you exit this webinar, we're going to put up a quick survey to help us get some feedback on today's sessions. We would really appreciate if you took the time to fill this out, as it will help us improve on future events, because we do plan on having more of these. Thank you again for taking time out of your day to join us. We always love the opportunity to engage with this community of ours, and we look forward to receiving all your awesome proposals by March 9th, 5 p.m. Eastern.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.